So I figure at this point I'm averaging about maybe a video per month. And seeing as how it's been a month since the review on the PTR 91, and I've got nothing better to do with my Friday morning, this is the Kimber Warrior 1911. For those of you who follow my channel, and if you are one of those few individuals, again, you have my utmost appreciation. You have probably seen this already in a video I did, months ago. I think it was back in like October. Me just kind of shooting out to 100 meters, something to that effect, just target shooting with this, but I've never actually done a full review on it. So I figured while I got the time to do so, I might as well just knock that out of the way now. So before we get into that, as always, we do the safety check. Chamber's clear, there's no magazine in the gun. I do have a couple magazines out here, which I'm going to touch on in a little bit, but you can see they're all empty, or maybe not, but just take my honest word for it, they are. And we got a couple boxes of ammo out here. Again, that's something we're going to touch on later. So now that that's out of the way, we'll just do a quick front to back, starting with the barrel. As a standard, it comes with the 5-inch stainless steel match grade barrel. I believe it's a 1 in 16 left-hand twist. Tritium night sights front and back. Stainless steel, not stainless steel, but steel frame, steel slide. Wearing the Kim Pro 2 premium finish, which they claim to be, claim it makes the pistol more resistant to the elements and that it's self-lubricating. Resistant to wear, I can understand. Self-lubricating, I don't buy that too much. There's been a couple of guns I've heard of in the past that have claimed to be self-lubricating. Some of you that may follow history on firearms a little more than I do may remember that when the M16 first came to issue with the U.S. Armed Forces, they claimed that was self-lubricating. And anybody that has ever been issued an M16 will probably tell you that that is utter bullshit. But moving on from that point, as a standard, it comes with a permanently mounted Picatinny rail on the bottom, and it's currently wearing a Surefire X300 flashlight or torchlight. Basically, aside from using this as a range gun, I primarily consider it a home defense type weapon, so I figured that'd be an appropriate thing to throw on there. Match grade trigger, I believe it's between 3 to 4 pounds, as dictated on the Kimber's website, and feels about there. Tactical G10 grips, ambidextrous safety, both left and right, and skeletonized hammer. Now, to get into a brief history on 1911s, and we're talking about a design that's over 100 years old, so I really will try to keep it as brief as possible. I think that the design, the idea of the 1911 stems all the way back to the 1890s, but the gun actually came into play, or was actually created in 1903, and then shortly after was issued to American soldiers in 1911, in the later stages of the Philippine-American War. And since then has been in standard U.S. service from World War I all the way to Vietnam. Was the last campaign that I was actually considered a standard issued sidearm. And after that, it was replaced somewhere in the mid-'80s by the Beretta 92F, which in military service is considered the M9. But even after that point, still remained in issue to select groups within the United States Armed Forces, primarily SOF units or Special Operations Forces, Army Special Forces, and actually more commonly found with Marine MARSOC units, which is where this design specifically comes into play. If I remember correctly, and I could be wrong on a lot of this information, if I am, go ahead and chime in to correct me, I don't mind it at all. Back in the mid-'80s, Marine Special Operations units, Marine Recon, and MARSOC, if MARSOC was even around back then, whatever the hell they were considered, were using the 1911 and then upgraded the design per their needs to the MEU pistol, which I'm assuming stands for Marine Expeditionary Unit. And sometime after that, they were looking to make another upgrade to the design to, meet more of the needs that they were dealing with at the time. And we're looking around between Colt, Springfield, and took an interest in Kimber when, if I remember correctly, they heard of the LAPD issuing their SWAT units, specially modified versions of the Kimber Custom 2, that they had modified to suit their needs, and kind of took a liking to that design, took the design that they were using, and then just modified it a little bit further to meet what they needed. And that became known as the Interim Close Quarters Battle Pistol, or ICQB. And that is pretty much the same thing as what you see here, if not damn near identical. I think the only thing that's really different are the grips and maybe a few other small details, but it's pretty much the identical pistol, the ICQB. Now, I believe there was a very limited run of Kimbers, these ICQB pistols, that were supplied to Marine MARSOC, that they were testing and evaluating, and actually had a small number of them in service and in issue, alongside the other designs that they were working with, and ultimately they went with Colt's offering, which was the M45. And most Marine MARSOC units, if you come across somebody that's involved with MARSOC, which is actually how I came to how I got interested in the 1911 in general, because when I was deployed, I had two MARSOC guys we were working very close with that, we go to the range every once in a while. I get to toy around with, their M45s. But I'm assuming most MARSOC guys you're going to meet, if you do have, the fortune to actually meet any of them, will be carrying the M45. I'm not even sure if you can find any Kimbers still within their supply chain. If there are, go ahead and let me know. But anyway, after that limited run of the ICQB pistol, Kimber decided to make a design for civilian consumption, which became the Kimber Warrior. And there's three different models of this. The standard one, which you see here. The Desert Warrior, which is, as far as I understand, the same gun with just a Cerakote or a Coyote finish. And then the Kimber Warrior SOC, which, Special Operations Command is what it stands for, I'm assuming, which is like a two-tone, weird-looking thing. To be honest with you, I'm not really sure what the significant difference is between the three Warrior models. This one's good enough for my needs. This is like the baseline Warrior model. What else can we talk about? Well, as far as 1911s, not Kimber specifically, but just the 1911s family of pistols in general, it's going to be one of the more popular models of handguns you're going to find, pretty much going shoulder to shoulder nowadays with Glocks. And I'm not trying to start a debate between the 1911 camp and, Glock fans. I actually had the good fortune to carry a Glock for 10 months in Afghanistan and absolutely loved it. It was easy to carry, it was durable, reliable, and I actually shot them fairly well. I just happened to shoot a 1911 better, and it probably has something to do with, the weight being able to absorb recoil better and the single action, trigger. Honestly, 1911s make me look like I can shoot a handgun fairly well, like I actually know what I'm doing. So I have no problem with Glocks at all. I just happen to shoot this one better. And I could foresee myself ending up with a Glock at some point in the future. More than likely, it's going to be something along the lines of a Glock 21 because, I typically have quite a bit of 45 ACP on hand, and I just don't feel like stocking up on another caliber. Which, while we're talking about ammo, is a pretty good way to segue into this topic. Eventually, I can imagine somebody accusing me of being a fanboy because I own 2 Kimber pistols and I shoot a lot of, federal. I'm not sponsored by anybody. Wouldn't mind if I was, because anybody that's, into owning firearms and target shooting knows that this is definitely not the cheapest hobby to be into. But I'm kind of the mentality where if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If I find something that works, and it works fairly well, I just attempt to stick with it. And like I said, eventually I'll own other handguns, but this is what I got for now. So for regular target shooting, this is what I've been using so far, but I have recently run into a problem acquiring this particular ammunition. And I guess while we're talking about ammo, I'm about to get into a gun rant. For anybody that owns handguns, you probably have, gun rants of your own. I could probably make a whole series of videos about the ones I have. But trying to make a short story out of this. I used to live in Rhode Island, which isn't the worst state to live in. It's definitely not the best, but it's far from the worst to live in to own a firearm. You can walk into a Walmart, which I quite often did, pick up a couple boxes of this and just carry about your merry way. But a few months ago, I had to relocate for work, and now this may come as a shock to some of you watching this. I live in Connecticut. I know it's kind of a weird concept, and Connecticut's kind of a funny state to live in regards to owning a firearm, specifically some of the ones that you know I own, and you're probably wondering whether or not I can legally own that kind of stuff here in the state. There is an assault weapons ban in Connecticut, and there's also a ban on high-capacity magazines. Fortunately for me, being an active member of the military or law enforcement, which I'm not, but if you are exempt from a lot of these policies that exist as long as you are actively enlisted. So I can still buy semi-automatic rifles that the state considers assault rifles, high-capacity magazines, ammunition, and I don't have to register any of these firearms. Now, this is coming directly from the state police, which I've talked to face-to-face on multiple occasions, and they continue to reassure me that this information is accurate, that I'm still within my rights and I can legally own what I own. But depending on who else you talk to, and that can include local law enforcement and even gun stores that exist in the state, they will give you conflicting information as to what you can and cannot own, what you can and cannot buy. And that would include Walmart, where I would typically find this type of ammunition. I'd be able to just walk into the store and buy it and just carry about my business. But here in Connecticut, you go to the sporting goods counter and ask to buy a box of this, and the kid working behind the counter will not have access to the ammunition cabinet. It'll just give you a very bewildered look, and then run off to find somebody else that may know more than he does. And it'll take about 15 minutes before that person shows up, and then they won't be able to figure out whether or not they can legally sell you ammo. Now, again, with a military ID, you can buy ammunition in this state without a permit, but they don't seem to be aware of that. And now I do have a pistol permit and everything, it doesn't matter, but even then, they still don't completely understand whether or not they can buy ammo. So now that joker will run off and try to find somebody else that may know more about him, more about whether or not they can sell ammo. That assistant manager, whoever he may be, will call the governor or some shit. And after about 45 minutes of dealing with this, I pretty much just kind of walked out of the store. It just wasn't worth the effort. Now, I can walk into a normal gun store that I typically visit, anywhere in the local area that I know I can buy ammo, and just pick up Federal American Eagle and just go about my business. I'm out of there in 2 minutes. So I have a feeling that that's more than likely what you're going to start seeing a lot more of on these videos with me shooting pistols is going to be Federal American Eagle. Now, if there's anybody out there that knows of any significant difference of quality between Federal Champion and American Eagle, please chime in, because I've done a little research of my own. I've gotten, hit or miss information, but if you genuinely know the difference between the two, and I'm not assuming there's a really significant difference in quality, but if you do know any real difference between the two, please let me know. And while you're working on it, maybe you can answer this for me too. For home defense loads or personal defense type ammunition, I decided to go with the Federal HST, and I found two different offerings in that. The first one I went with was the standard pressure 230 grain HST rounds, which come in boxes of 20, these little fancy plastic cases, and they go for about $25 a box for a box of 20. And the cartridges look really clean. It's premium ammunition, and I had a pretty good run of that until I found these online, which is again Federal HST, but these are the Plus P versions, and they're labeled for tactical law enforcement as opposed to personal defense. And these come in boxes of 50 for generally the same price as you'll get these boxes of 20. But looking at the cartridges, I'm not even sure if it's going to show up on camera. These don't appear to be as clean as the home defense rounds or the personal defense rounds. Now, my take of this, or my understanding, is that the law enforcement labeled boxes are basically just that. They're meant for consumption by police departments, and they're mass produced for that. Whereas these ones are more of a premium brand of ammunition, and I don't know, the cartridges are cleaner. They're put through a little bit more of a detailed process. But other than being a plus P or higher pressure round, this is another one where I just don't fully understand the difference between the two, or if there's a difference in quality from the home defense rounds to the law enforcement rounds. So again, if you know about that or have any more information about that, I'd love to hear about it. Please chime in. Now, talking about magazines, it comes with a single Kimber 7-round magazine, which I've shot on multiple occasions. It seems reliable enough. I haven't had any issues with it yet. But as a standard, I tend to just have handfuls of Wilson Combat magazines, which you've, again, already seen previously, in a couple different configurations. This one sits more flush with the bottom of the grip for, I guess, if you need to use it in concealed carry. This one has a rubber floor plate, in case you drop it on the ground, absorbs impact. And then I have one of these 10-round magazines, which I just kind of bought out of curiosity just to see, I don't know, just to kind of mess around with it. And I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about it. It just looks, kind of weird sticking out of the bottom of the gun like that. And I know a lot of you will probably say that, for concealed carry, whatever, it hangs up. This, again, is a home defense gun. That's primarily what I have this for, so I'm not really worried about concealing it or anything like that. And it wouldn't hurt to have the extra 2 rounds on tap. Again, these are both 8-round magazines. That's a 7. But, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in a rush to get any more, I'll tell you that. But so far, as I've found, they work just fine. It's just, I don't know, something about the way it hangs at the bottom of the gun like that. This looks ridiculous. I'm sorry. What else can we talk about? For the potential use, if you were to get this, or basically just a 1911 in general. On Kimber's website, they tout it as being ideal for duty, home defense, and everyday carry. Now, the first two I can understand completely. As a carry gun, I don't know, man. I've met a few people who have told me that they do carry full-size 1911s, and they believe that the only way to get the full potential or take full advantage of the 45 ACP is to have a 5-inch barrel. I mean, if you look at most of these boxes, when they tell you the expected velocity or any of the stats of what the cartridge is able to do, typically that's going to be measured from a 5-inch barrel. So obviously, moving down to a 4 or 3-inch, you're going to lose a little bit of velocity and whatever. And for them, that was just like a deal breaker. But for everybody else out there, this is just going to be a ridiculously heavy thing to be carrying around on you every day. Most people like to compare the Glock 19 to every other gun out there as the ideal carry gun. And if I remember correctly, that clocks in somewhere around 20 ounces. And as you can see here, without the light, it'd probably come to 40 even. But that's still a heavy thing to have on your hip all day. I know that when I had to carry an M9 around, that was heavy enough as it was. I'm not even sure what the hell that weighs, but it was like having an anchor tied to your hip. And a lot of people also go on about the limited capacity of a 1911 only holding 7 or 8 rounds, as opposed to most modern 9mm or 40 that can hold like 13, 15, 18, whatever the hell it is. But a lot of you probably noticed the same as I did, kind of a trend in the last couple of years of these smaller pocket-sized concealed carry handguns. And most of them are going to be of a single stack design that aren't going to hold 8 rounds anyway. And if you happen to live in a state, much like I do, and don't have the good fortune to be in the military or be a cop, you're probably only restricted to 10 rounds anyway. So the one benefit I will say about the 1911 is that even against the Glock, it has a much thinner profile. So if you end up with a 1911 that is meant for concealed carry, which is actually another video I'll get into because I also happen to own an ultra carry too, that might be something you'd be a little more interested in. The thin profile, the lightweight. I think that one only chimes in around 25 ounces, which it's a little heavier, but not exactly what I would consider a deal breaker. I don't know, that might be for you. I've carried around a couple of times already. I don't carry every day, but that might be something to be more interested in. As far as my interests in this, again, and I shot in 1911. I actually got the chance to shoot a lot of different types of weapons because we were working with several different groups over there of several different nationalities. So along with what we have in our supply chain, I was also able to shoot H&Ks, Steyr, STG-77s, AK-47s, SIGs, Glocks. I mean, you name it. Any weapon that any of our coalition forces use, I probably had my hands on it for at least a magazine or two. And I got a couple opportunities to shoot the 1911 and just decided that kind of fit me best, I guess. I mean, outside of the history and the lineage, the track record of the 1911, which is very hard to argue against. It's been around for a while, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. I don't know, it feels right in my hands. It really does. I shoot very well with it. Like I said before, this gun makes me look like I know how to shoot a handgun, and I'm really not that good. And much like the EBR that I picked up, I knew that this was my only chance to, well, probably not my only chance, but one of the rare chances I'd get to actually drop that kind of money on a premium handgun, or not a premium handgun, but a nice handgun. Something that'd be nice to use at the range, something that's got a pretty good record behind it. Eventually, like I said, I'll probably end up getting a Glock or something like that, and it's not going to break the bank. But yeah, this one, I figured I had to get it then. It'd be a little bit easier than trying to finance it now. And again, I can't say I regret it at all. This thing is not really giving me a single issue at all, outside of the initial break-in period. For a lot of people that own 1911s, they'll tell you that before you can actually consider it reliable, I guess you have to put about 300 to 500 rounds through it as soon as you get it. Because just with the tight custom, well, maybe not custom fit, but everything on this gun runs pretty tight. When I first got it, it was even like a pretty good effort just to rack the slide back. So after about 500 rounds, everything kind of loosens up and becomes more manageable, basically. And even in that break-in period, I only had like maybe one or two light strikes and a failure to feed, and that was on the first 4 magazines. After that, it was smooth sailing. And at this point, I probably put about 1,500 rounds through it, something around that ballpark. And it just keeps chugging along. So yeah, I do not regret that decision one bit. So, I don't know, once again, if you do have any questions about this or have any of that information that I was inquiring about before, between the different brands of ammunition, if you know a little bit more about the history of this, I'm always willing to learn more. I don't claim to be a subject matter expert on any of this stuff, so yeah, definitely give me a shout out. Until then, or until the next video, just be responsible and have a nice day.